Hi, what you're about to see is an interview with a vendor in the space in and around data mesh. We'd like to thank Nick Heudecker for graciously doing these interviews with vendors. We'd also like to make it clear that the data mesh community and data mesh learning doesn't necessarily endorse anything that these vendors are talking about, but that we wanted to give them a voice to talk about what they may offer in the space, so people are aware of vendors, because obviously if everybody has to build everything themselves, the data mesh is going to be pretty hard. So with that, we really thank Nick for doing this great work, and we hope that this is good and useful to you.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Nick Heudecker. I work at Cribl, the observability pipeline company, and I'm joined today for the data mesh learning session by Dan DeMers from Cinchy. And Dan, we've known each other for a while now, actually, I think.
We have.
Yeah, about what, 3 years, 4 years?
Something like that. Feels like 30 or 40. But no,
at this rate, I feel like I'm aging in dog years. I think the pandemic and a startup, they will do that to you. And so today we're going to talk about Cinchy, where you guys fit in the data mesh space, what customers are doing with you, kind of where, what makes you unique. So I'll let you go ahead and take it away. Maybe, I'll ask the first question here, like,
Sure.
Tell me about Cinchy. When were you guys founded? What's your funding look like? So on.
Yeah, so we've been in the market for about 3 years, although 3 years ago we were like 2 people, my co-founder Karan and I. Since then, we've grown after a couple funding rounds. We're 53 employees today. We've raised about 15 million. We're going to be doubling over the coming year. We're now thinking through the timing of our Series B. So we did our Series A just kind of in the thick of the pandemic, which was interesting to do that all virtually. And we've had some pretty good growth in the market in those 3 years. We landed a tier 1 bank, and since then we've grown to over 100 enterprise organizations that are actively using the platform. And the thing that I'm personally most proud of is the fact that we don't have any churn. We've never lost a customer. So customers not only continue to renew, but they actually expand their usage of the platform. So like we set out to create something that was real and added value and solved real problems. We didn't want to create vaporware and sell PowerPoints and promises. So I'm happy with kind of where things have progressed thus far.
What kind of challenges did you find raising during a pandemic? What was that like? I think that people would be interested in knowing that.
It was weird because we did our seed pre-pandemic, and you fly, you travel, you meet people, you do presentations in person, and there was no such options. It's all over Zoom, and I still remember once we closed and everything was settled, kind of having celebratory drinks with the lead investors, and it was over, drinking a beer over a Zoom call, and it was just weird. But luckily we had met our lead investors at least a couple times in person before everything went into lockdown, because we've known them for a little while actually. But for the most part, like everything was done virtually. That it just created a bit of a surreal experience. But I guess that's whether you're fundraising or building a company or hiring people, it's the same surrealness that everyone's experiencing together.
Agreed. Yeah. Did you find the process was actually faster because you didn't have to physically travel?
Yes, it was. And not only is it true from a fundraising perspective, but even from a sales perspective, where you could just click a button and boom, there you are. It doesn't matter where the other person is in the world, to the point where it just doesn't matter. So I would say it was definitely faster because, to have a single meeting in the pre-COVID world, maybe it's a 3-day trip, whereas now it's a 1-hour venture. So 3 days, 1 hour, it's night and day. So through the course of 1 day, which then leads to Zoom fatigue and all the other stuff that everyone's suffering, but definitely faster, more efficient, and I don't know, even things like diligence and whatnot, because everyone's digital. So I would say it's simplified, at least that side of it. But then that's offset by the fact that there was so much confusion and volatility in the world that no one knew what was going to go on. That kind of clouded the whole process. So we didn't know what to make of it, like as we're fundraising when there's so many unknowns. The nice thing about, and we just got lucky because some businesses would have been killed and some businesses would have thrived as a result of the shift, right? Because it basically flashed everything forward by a good 10 years. Is it just so happened that what we were building, and it's not because we did anything brilliant, we got lucky where we picked to build something that actually would be better suited with an accelerating shift towards virtual and remote work because it's enabling collaboration on data. So kind of dumb luck, but it worked out well for us.
No, not dumb luck. Good timing. Good timing.
Good timing.
You saw this coming.
Exactly. I predicted.
So about the product, right? So you kind of hit this stride where you hit like, the coveted product market fit or product pandemic market fit. So tell me and anybody watching, what does Cinchy do? Like, what is the secret sauce here, right? I know that data mesh is getting a lot of hype right now, and there's a lot of companies that are looking to control a lot of that airtime. Yeah, so where's Cinchy fit? What makes it unique?
Yeah, so the interesting phenomena that we've observed over the past 50 years is you got these things called applications, and you're continuously buying, building, and integrating them, and they each manage data in a silo. And the trend is to have more apps, not less apps, monolithic to distributed to client server to 3-tier to SOA to microservices are more apps, not less, and continuing with, data isolated to meet the needs of the application scope. And you have to do this integration thing, APIs and ETLs. And but when you try and do analytics and extract insights out of that, well, wait a minute, all that silos is a huge problem. So how do we get the data together, whether it's building data marts or data warehouses and doing top down or bottom up, or building virtual warehouses using data virtualization technology, or building data fabrics to simplify, all these different approaches, they all add value, they all solve some problems, but they're narrowly focused on enabling analytics. What none of them do is actually change how the applications work. And I don't mean the existing applications. Let's talk about the current and the future ones that are under active development. So that's where we saw the opportunity, is to basically change that, such that you're able to build applications in a way that the individual apps don't actually store data. They can have their own app-specific model, because you can never force the convergence on a single unified model at an enterprise level. But enabling them to basically interact with data through an abstraction layer that is not that dissimilar to how your home hooks into the power grid. The power grid provides that as a service. You can produce power and you can consume power from the grid, and the grid abstracts away all the complexity. So that's what we've created. We've created what we call a Dataware platform that enables the applications that you're buying, building, and integrating to collaborate on data without needing to store data in application-specific silos. And in fact, as you connect your existing data, you're essentially breaking it free from the existing silo and now making it available for real-time collaboration for future use cases without needing to do integration. So it's essentially the path to eliminating silos, and the root cause of fragmentation is how we see it.
This sounds really, magic, right?
Sure.
It sounds a little bit like data virtualization. It sounds a little bit like,
physicalization of virtualization, because virtualization has fragmented data behind it. Imagine if the data wasn't fragmented. Right. It doesn't mean it's all in one location, right? Like the power grid is not in one location. It's a decentralized network, but you can interact with it through a common interface. That's really what it is doing.
Well, the power grid model doesn't really, or the analogy doesn't really work, because I don't care what other houses are doing on the grid. Right. And there are standards for power distribution. Every company or every country seems to have their own. But so, in applications, I don't care if I'm using one application and I'm in one part of the company, and let's say I'm in marketing, I don't care what finance is doing. Right. I just don't. Right. They've got their own applications. They don't care what I'm doing. At some point, we might want to bring those together. So is there content you can share to kind of?
No, you do care, and I'll show you why.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen for a second. Can you see it okay now?
Yeah.
All right. So this is just an architecture of the platform, but what I'm going to do is show you something that kind of illustrates something that's always been true, but it's been hard to really see what's actually there because our vision's been clouded by all these silos. But what you're seeing, so I'm in the platform, and I'm seeing our own environment. We use it to run our company, but all the different colors represent different domains. So a domain is basically something that's aligned to a business that has its own governance boundary, it has its own autonomy, and it's a collection of basically business entities and value objects. So for example, if I go to compliance and expand that, you can see it has a bunch of things like policies and action items and call trees. And if I go to, let's say, marketing, there you can see all of our marketing data. And if I expand that, you can see it has things like events and search keywords and leads and opportunities. And like each of these different objects really represent a data structure. And I can actually zoom in and go in and see the data. I won't do that here, but I can go in, see it and change it. So my role,
let me interrupt you for 1 second here.
Yeah.
How do these graphs get built?
So they get built in a collaborative manner. So if I go just into the native experience, I can basically create an entirely new table associated to a domain, which basically puts it under the governance of that domain. And my data structure can interconnect with other data structures within the domain and even across domains. But I can build that as what we call a builder. And I can also, of course, have user managed data go in these data sets, or I can also connect data from existing legacy applications. I can connect it to Salesforce, I can connect it to a mainframe, and I can do bidirectional connectivity real time. And I can even create blended data sets. So they're created gradually as you deliver business capabilities that are composable. Each business capability contributes to the network. You don't build a whole model in a project. You build it project by project, but it enables collaborative model evolution through schema plasticity, which is the reason that people don't use, the lack of that is why you end up trying to create this isolation, because coordinating schema change is nearly impossible without that enablement of plasticity.
So this is much more around operational uses of data rather than,
yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So give me some examples of like what people are doing. Like what are some of your customers doing with this? Maybe that'll bring it home.
Sure. Yeah.
It looks really cool. I have to say, this is a great looking interface. That was one of the things that really impressed me when I first was introduced to Cinchy.
Well, actually, I just want to show you one thing first to answer the earlier question of why you do care about the broader context, even though you're trying to solve for a particular business context. I'm going to go into marketing just for a second, and I'm going to zoom in and grab all of our marketing data. So you can see it's all this purple data here. And if I zoom in, you can see there's client success stories and leads, and I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to move all of our marketing data up here. And let me just pause the animation, because data has gravity. So the more connected, the larger the mass, the more of a gravitational pull. I'm just going to temporarily suspend that. So you can turn off gravity. It's kind of cool. So let's go to employee success, where you've got things like employees. This is what some organizations may call human resources. But I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to put all of our HR data here, and let me grab sales. And I can grab anything. I can grab product, I can grab compliance, I can grab finance, all the different functions of the business. And I'm only seeing what I have access to see. But so here's all of our sales data. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to move that over there. So notice something here, though, and actually I'm going to go one more step. I'm going to grab just one object. This is employees, and you can see it's large. And I'm going to move employees like way up here. So hopefully this is coming out on your screen smooth. But what you'll notice is
to catch up there. It's okay. Now it's starting to catch up now on the Zoom. Okay, yeah.
It's nice and smooth on my side, but it's the fun of Zoom. But so hopefully what you see is employees up in the corner here, and then a bunch of yellow data here, a bunch of green data here, and a bunch of purple data down here.
Yeah, that's coming through now.
Okay, good. So what you're seeing, though, is notice how it's all interconnected. So an employee connects into marketing, an employee connects into employee success, aka HR, an employee connects into sales, and it connects into all these other things in the center, this other cluster, which is basically a collection of other data products that are spanning other domains. And you can see every line here is a link where it's an integration saved. So it's very hard to find an isolated data set. It's all interconnected. So whether you're operating in the context of a single application, you are using information that is pushed and pulled to and from other contexts in the organization. And what you don't want to do is have to re-manage that data. You want to be able to hook in and reuse that data, but at the same time, you want to retain autonomy. You don't want to be at the mercy of change, where if they make a model change, it breaks your application, right? So the question becomes then, how do you facilitate a zero effort reuse while avoiding schema change from breaking code? And that's probably a conversation for another day. There's some secret sauce magic stuff. It's what we call plasticity that makes that actually possible. But the reason you care is there's so much opportunity to reuse because data doesn't live inside of an application. We may think it does, but it doesn't in the real world. It's all connected. And that's the problem, is applications interact with data because they're operating in a context, but the data doesn't live in that context. It's used in that context. So there's a bit of a paradigm shift that has to happen. And I will get back to your other question of how is it actually used. But this is the shift here, which is since 1948, the first computer program, we've designed data to serve the applications. And then we try and stitch Humpty Dumpty back together again to do analytics. But what if you flip the model on its head in a way that wasn't previously practicable because there was no enabling technology, where essentially you change your model where you're designing your apps to serve the data? That's the difference, right? And there's a bit of a red pill, blue pill phenomena that happens here because it's hard to believe, but it's incredibly simple, which is magic. So it's more of an unlearning than learning. And then to answer your question on use cases, right? I'm flipping all over slides here, but so some of the, like we use it to run our entire business. That's what you're seeing here. Sorry, I'm just going to flip ahead.
Go a little slower on the slides. I don't think it's updating as quickly on your end as it is, or sorry, it's updating faster on your end than it is here.
Okay, all right. So you should see a slide that just says use case client data platform, or CDP.
Nope, waiting for it to get there right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There it is. Okay, yeah, it's really slow right now.
That's a huge delay.
Yeah, you're up now though. CDP.
Okay, all right. So a lot of people are familiar with technologies that are trying to basically create a data platform for client data needs that can enable sales and marketing to become more autonomous and independent, and build connectivity to create a single view of the customer and optimize basically revenue growth. This is something that you could purchase as a commercial product, but from a perspective of what we call Dataware, this is a templated use case. Because whether I'm building a client data platform to basically get that interconnected view of data in my CRMs and my customer data management systems, and all the things where customer data lives today, internal, external, but separately, my HR friends are creating an employee data platform where they're doing the same thing, but instead of the Salesforce and Dynamics, they're pushing and pulling from the Workdays and the PeopleSofts of the world. Well, this is an employee data platform, and then others may be using it to get control over their SaaS data because who wants to pay to get access to your own data? You want to be able to break it free from a paywall. So creating this interconnected view of data that was otherwise trapped behind these paywalls. These are all just examples of use cases, but whether you're building an SDP or an EDP or a CDP, it's really the unified data platform is really why today organizations buy the platform. Is these just become templatable use cases versus separate bespoke solutions. So it is a platform-based approach to solving for data complexity.
So it's an interesting solution for an age-old problem, but my question is, so developers build applications, right? Yep. And they primarily think about, well, I'm building the application, the data is kind of a side effect almost, right? I care about it, but I don't really care about it.
Yep.
And so when you're going and talking to prospects about this, who are you actually talking to? Like who's the buyer? Who gets it? And then I want to talk about the adoption, cycle. Like how long does that take?
Right. And it's a good question. So there's different personas that are at play here, because as you mentioned, there are people who build applications, there are people who integrate applications, there are people who use applications, and there are people who own data and want to govern that data, right? So they all have their own perspective, and they all can get to kind of different things through a unified approach. But generally, the conversation starts with more on the IT side is what I would say is the conversation starter, because it is a platform. And it's really someone who's overseeing the portfolio of applications, which, you know, in a big global bank, maybe someone who heads up a business line. In a mid-sized organization, and maybe the CIO, head of IT architecture. It's basically someone who has that accountability at a portfolio level. Because if you make the decision for an individual application, you're missing the point of it all. That being said, you have to kind of be respectful of the perspective of the developer who's building that application. But it's really top of house IT leadership is the foot in the door. But then the question is, well, how do you actually get started? Because I have 10,000 apps. I spend billions of dollars on integration every year. What am I going to do with this? Rebuild everything? Well, of course. No, I'm joking. You're not going to rebuild everything. What you're going to do is you're going to use it to change how you build the new things, right? The things that you have are you already have. You're not going to rebuild them. Just because there's electric vehicles means you're not going to go and destroy all gas guzzling cars in the world instantaneously. It's you phase it in, right? So how do I get started? Well, I'm using it to accelerate the creation of new solutions, meaning there's going to be builders who would be building those solutions, integrators who'd be integrating those solutions. And that's where the perspective is a little bit different, right? Because if you're building, well, it depends what you're actually doing. If you're doing like traditional pro code versus low code versus really just app enabling data, or if it's a vendor app and you're just really tailoring it, it could be SaaS or a legacy app. The nature of what a Dataware platform can do is a little bit different depending on how you're actually architecting it. And if you're and I'll skip over that. If you're looking at it from the perspective of integration, you know, how do you switch from integration to collaboration, which is a different paradigm? And again, you're not replacing the integrations that you already have, but going forward, you can think differently and apply those differences as an accelerator. And from a business user, today you think of there's an app for everything and there's a UI for every app. Well, what about the universal app experience that is powered by metadata, right? So it is definitely a shift from each of these personas perspectives, but you're getting started small, right? Because you're not gonna basically replace everything. So now to your other question of how do you actually get started on this, and what is the time to value and things like that? Well, essentially you're applying it to the projects that you're going to do anyways, where quite frankly, if it doesn't save you time and money in that project, don't buy it. It doesn't make any sense. It should immediately pay for itself. And you're starting with the net new. So you are starting small. And if it works and it adds value, then you'll use it for the next project and the next project and next project. And you can introduce your transformation gradually. But it starts to add value because it's removing cost and complexity from these projects immediately, which is the only reason why you would buy it in the first place.
So in your previous graphic there, and that makes sense. I get that. Like you're starting out small. I think that's the best way to go, right? Get some wins that you can get under your belt and get some experience and some social capital that you can build with those wins. Yeah. In the previous slide, you and I think the one before that as well, you had a database, right? Represented, right? This is one here that's rendering, still coming up. I can't believe how slow Zoom is today. The diagrams here give the impression that Cinchy is replacing databases. Is that accurate?
It's not replacing, it's avoiding new ones.
Okay.
Because your existing system, so actually, apologies, I'm going to make your Zoom go crazy again because I'm going through slides quickly and knowing that they're buffering on your side. By the way, there's a setting in Zoom that you can turn on buffering or not, and that's probably why there's a delay, but I highly recommend turning that off so you get lossy compression, but you don't have this delayed effect. So if you think of the life pre-Dataware, where you have a pro code, a low code, a vendor app, and a SaaS app. And sorry, can you see, what do you see on your screen now? Do you see, sounds cool, but where to start?
No, we may have to do this recording again, man. I can't believe, there we go. There it is. Okay. I do have buffering turned off or turned on.
Oh, okay. That's weird.
I just don't know what's happening. Yeah, today's just a rough day for Zoom. Go figure. Okay, sounds cool, but where to start? Okay, before and after Dataware.
Yeah. So so let's just talk at a conceptual level for a second. So without Dataware, and this is how it's been from the beginning, is you got apps, and whether you build it or someone else builds it, it has its own data store, and that data store is a silo, and you do integration to basically de-silo it. Right? That's just how it works. And this is again on the operational plane, not on the analytical plane, because that view is not shown here, because there's a whole other dimension to when you think of how do I get the data together to do analytics, and that's where the mesh and other things can kick in. And in an after Dataware world, we're saying that if you were to build these very same applications using this approach, then they wouldn't manage data independent of the Dataware. The Dataware would act as the data store because it has embedded controls. It has a bunch of other things. It's not a database. It's a Dataware platform, which is much more. But if I have existing systems, I ain't going to replace them. At least not anytime soon. Probably not anytime in our lifetime. Heck, companies still use mainframes. So these applications, they work the way that they work. It's really the new one. So if I'm going to build a new application, maybe one case I'm doing pro code, I'm doing, I don't know, .NET or Java or Python or whatever, it doesn't matter. And maybe somewhere else I'm using a low code platform, is I can use Dataware to cut out the complexity of those builds. And I can use Dataware to connect in data from my existing systems, but I ain't replacing that database. It is what it is, sadly.
That makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. So you talked about a couple of use cases, right? You talked about, a customer data platform, client data platform, SaaS data platform.
Yep.
What kind of pain points are customers having when they're like, all right, I'm gonna go with Cinchy. I'm gonna try this out, see what I can do. What's the trigger?
So the main trigger, I'll stop sharing my screen and let the buffering catch up with itself. There we go. So the main trigger is basically a growing lack of tolerance for this integration tax that slows down everything. So every time you deliver a new business capability, you have to integrate it. Whether you buy or build it or rent it on the cloud, there's integration friction. So that's the impediment to organizational agility. So anything that you can do to gain back that agility by reducing your integration tax is a game changer. Which is why they would go with this. So the catalyst, it's not like there's this magic project that's the reason that they would do it, because you can get started any time and apply it to your project. But the reason that they do that is the realization that every time you add an app, even if you have your analytics plane in full working order, you're adding a new silo and you have to de-silo it. So you're just back at the drawing board. So it's basically the opportunity to stop the app trap, where every new app is a new silo. And enable you to make change at light speed, because you don't have this ball and chains of integration that follows you around. That's why they would choose it in the first place. We like to think of ourselves as not an integration company, it's an end of integration company.
But what does this look like for microservice architectures, right? Which typically, if you're following the dogma of microservices, yep, every service has got its own database, it's all run independently.
Yep.
This kind of flies in the face of that, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So microservices is cool because it allowed, if you think of the evolution of microservices from monolithic, it allows basically federated development. I can develop, you can develop, we can develop simultaneously, we can agree on contracts, and I can deploy separate from you, and it gives us that independence. But if I'm storing data and you're storing data and we need to integrate our data, then we're now back having interconnectivity and interdependencies through that. What the magic of microservice is doing is it's essentially creating a way of building an interconnected network of code where you can own your domain and I can own my domain, and we can have autonomy and independence. Think of what we're doing with data is kind of like the other half of that. That is missing, but you're absolutely right. It's very different than let's call it the purist version of microservices architecture, where the data is within each service. What we're saying is don't continue to have data live inside of the application, be it a micro or macro app, is completely separated from apps altogether. You've got data, you've got code, and they interact with each other. They both have a place in the world, but no one is owned by the other party. They're two different things that need to interact with each other. So what that means is microservices is great for code, but they should each individually interact with the equivalent for data, which is how we think of Dataware.
Got it. Okay, no, I think that makes sense.
But definitely it's non-traditional thinking. But ask anyone who's done microservices at scale about the data problem. It's tricky.
It's a nightmare. I've talked to a lot of companies that have said, we've gone to a full microservice architecture for the applications, but we still have a database monolith on the back end because we're afraid to touch it. That's not uncommon at all. I apologize for anybody listening. My landscapers are outside and they are the natural predator of the Zoom call. So let's talk about data mesh for a second, right? I mean, there's what Cinchy's doing, and there's the data mesh topic. Do you feel with conversations that you're having with prospects and customers that data mesh is something that is top of mind, or is it kind of this academic topic that hasn't really gotten traction yet? Where do you fall in that?
I would say it's definitely changing, which is exciting. So it's coming up more and more in conversations, whether I bring it up or others bring it up, but others are bringing it up now. And it's still early. So there's a little bit, in an abstract level. So it's like, how do I make it actually real? Because it's, as we know, data mesh isn't a product. It's an approach. It's an idea. It's kind of a way of shaping an organization and delineating accountabilities. And, it's a bigger people and process change than it is just, buying an app and all of a sudden you've got your data mesh, right? So there's definitely a growing awareness of that, and there's lots of excitement about that, which is great. But then that needs to be channeled into, well, how do I actually bring it to life? How do I enable my data products to exist inside of domains where those domains can have ownership and autonomy? And how do I enable that autonomy and balance it with interoperability so that my data product can interact with your data product, even if they're spanning different domains? Like, it now starts to open up a heck of a lot of questions. And we don't have all the answers. We'd like to think we have some, but we definitely don't have all of them, because it's just a piece in the overall puzzle. But definitely growing awareness for sure.
Yeah, because I hang out on the data mesh learning Slack, and all the questions are really good, but they're incredibly nuanced, right?
Yeah.
I think people are looking for data about performance, looking for data about outcomes, even information about data products. And it's incredibly hard to come by right now, right? Because I think everyone's mesh implementation is different because every company is different.
Yeah, it is. Like, even us using our own technology, trying to use it to its fullest potential, it can get confusing. Because no one has the answers. It's not like you can just say, well, just here's the, double click this and it's solved. No, you have to kind of use your brain, which is exciting for people who like to use their brains. And because it's early days, it's like a bit of a revolution. So, but what I've noticed, because I'm on the same community, is the questions in the earlier days, like we go back even just months ago, they were kind of more abstract and conceptual, and now they're more like getting more specific, I find, which I think is exciting because it demonstrates that people are actually doing something about it versus just talking about it, right? So I'm seeing kind of an evolution of sophistication in the community, which is great, and it seems to be happening at light speed, which is cool.
It is cool. I think data has always had this idea of, I'm going to consolidate, right? I'm going to move things. I'm going to make a copy. And there's an incredible amount of friction there, right? We saw this with data warehousing, data lakes, you name it. And I think it's interesting to see kind of data meshes feel a little more empathetic to how companies and people actually work. And I think that's exciting, at least for me, it is. So Dan, you've really been generous with your time today. If folks want to learn more, where can they find out more about Cinchy? Are you guys available on-prem, in the cloud? Give me those details.
Yeah, so we support both models, on-prem, cloud. We're cloud platform agnostic, so you can do Azure, GCP, AWS, et cetera. But just check it out at Cinchy.com. And we have what we call Cinchy TV, where we have basically the Cinchy version of Netflix, but don't cancel your Netflix subscription yet. Check it out first and see if it's worth canceling or not. But there's lots of content online. Check it out, and you can just click on Ask Us Anything, and you'll see my recorded voice, and happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Perfect. And you guys are hiring, I imagine?
Yeah, we have like 29 open roles at the time, at this exact time. So we're hiring kind of all over the board across all functions. And not only that, we're also a global team with COVID. So like our head of marketing works out of Spain, our head of demand generations in Northern California. We've got people all over the world now. We've got, so with If this is something that is interesting to you and you want to restore data autonomy, starting with giving companies control over their data, then definitely hit us up online and check out the roles that we have open.
No, it's been great. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
If you want to know more about Cribl, so if you want to know more about Cinchy, you can find that online at cinchy.com. If you want to know more about Cribl, you can click these two links up here. And so once again, thanks, Dan, for your time. I'm Nick Heudecker, and this will be posted up on YouTube. That's probably where you're watching it now. So thanks. Bye.
All right, bye.